targeted 5 essential habits that the 80-80
Yeah.
marriage, should pursue. Could you identify those or explain those if possible? And maybe, if you're willing, maybe some of the ways you and your wife have lived those out. Because I know you've mentioned kind of, there's one of those in there is a social media piece, and you've talked a little bit about that. And sort of kind of how do you and your wife live those out, especially in light of having a child? Is that kind of an involvement there with that whole family piece?
Totally. Well, I love this too, because when you write a book, for me, it's been 3 years since I wrote this content.
Mm-hmm.
So you're giving me a good test of the 5. See if I can do it.
I've got the book in case you need a
yeah. Well, here's what I believe are the 5, and they're all great habits. One is just this habit of radical generosity. So contribution, appreciation, bringing that into your life and your world. Another is revealing, which we talked about before, sort of really revealing those hard truths and making that a centerpiece of your life together. Another piece of it is having some sort of meeting or time to talk about structure and logistics and all those things that's separate from, your time together where you're having fun. So this would be like a family meeting of some sort, carving out time, creating space for time together. So these would be like things like date nights or weekends away. And then finally, as you mentioned, the last one is really about distraction and creating space from distraction. And the reason that one's on the list is when we interviewed couples, one of the things we heard from most couples is that their primary challenge isn't that they're not together. It's that when they're together, they're not connected. And, phenomenon we heard about a lot is like, we're lying in bed at the end of the day. I'm on Instagram. He's on the New York Times or CNN or whatever. And we're not connecting. And so really becoming more skillful about our devices, I think is a big deal. And all of us, we're aware of that, but often we let devices get in the way of connection.
Yeah, that's such a huge one. As I think through I've got 2 boys. So what are they going to be faced with as they grow up?
Yeah.
And the device thing is a huge, huge piece of that. And
totally.
So that's a big one for us that we want to try to model for them is putting those devices away and being really intentional about that. And like you said, the 2 that really jumped out to me were the creating space for connection and then removing those distractions, because as we've talked about, that's so much of the modern world. I feel like that's going to be a superpower, is the ability. I kind of equate it with almost like, as we look at the impact of nutrition on things like diabetes, I almost see it as the same way of this overloading, right? Creating an overload signal with so much information and distractions that the people who can separate themselves from that and have good habits in place, just like the people who have good nutritional habits, there's plenty more involved, of course, but it's going to set them at a huge advantage compared to, I would say, the average or their peers in many cases. And so that's really something that I think is an important piece that I want to pass on to my boys. So thanks for those 5 habits. I think there's a ton of value in there.